Well, hey, we're glad you are with us for the second week of a series we're calling Just Visiting, as we talk about the qualities and the characteristics that show up in us as followers of Jesus that might look a little different from the culture around us. And today we're talking about one of those qualities that can actually make you look a little naive, maybe a little out of touch, if you live out this quality against the backdrop of the things that are happening in the world right now. Hey, jump in with us, click the link, and we'll talk about what that is right now. We jumped into a new series where we are kind of pointing at a part of the experience of following Jesus that might be a little bit hard to see if you're not specifically looking for it, right? But the truth is, the more you follow Jesus, the more you're probably going to notice it. And that thing that you will start noticing more and more, we think, is this: that when we decide to follow Jesus and live more and more like people who belong to Him, you'll probably start noticing this growing sense that the world that we are living in is not really that comfortable for us anymore. It's not really our home. And that the longer we live here, the less and less this world feels like our home. In fact, C.S. Lewis pointed to this kind of in a philosophical way when he said this. He said, if we find ourselves with a desire that nothing in this world can satisfy, the most probable explanation is that we were made for another world. And people who follow Jesus more and more start to experience that. We've learned that as we follow Jesus and as we begin to step in His direction, we might be getting more and more of a sense that Jesus is gathering up this different kind of community that's characterized by a different set of values than the culture that's around it. And we talked about this a little while back, right? That Jesus is shaping this community that's distinctive, that's conspicuous. It stands out from the culture around it because it's just different than the culture around. In fact, we said if there's one thing that everybody agrees on, in fact, whether you're a Christian or not, whether you follow Jesus or not, everybody agrees on this, that followers of Jesus ought to be different. Even people who don't follow Jesus think that. They think people who do follow Jesus probably should be characterized a little bit more all the time by values and actions that look more like Jesus. And here's what we know. Around here, look, nobody is perfect, right? We are all on that journey. But we are on a journey to look less and less like we used to look and show up more and more like people who are influenced by Jesus and who are inhabited by His Spirit. So, in this series, we're going to talk about the qualities that show up more and more in a community of people that are taking their cues from Jesus. And I'll just warn you, the quality that we're going to be talking about today is one that if you express this quality more and more, you are going to sound a little crazy. In fact, you hold this up against the backdrop of things that are happening in this world around us, and there are people that are going to think you are a little naive or maybe uninformed, or maybe just plain ignorant. In fact, this particular quality is one of the defining characteristics. It is one of the conspicuous distinctives of those people who look closely to Jesus, who follow more closely after Jesus, and have been since the earliest of times. From the earliest followers of Jesus, they began expressing this quality the more and more they followed Jesus. And I will just tell you, this quality, like many of the others we're going to talk about, is always most noticeable when the world is at its worst. I mean, you notice it more and more when everything around is going wrong. When things are not going well, this is one of the qualities that stands out the most, and it's this right here: hope. Right now, I got to be honest with you, this word gets thrown around a lot anytime people want something that is not currently a part of their experience, right? We start saying things, well, man, I hope this happens, or I hope I get that, or I hope I can have that at some point. I hope the future gets a little better, right? You gotta have hope. In fact, in a season like we are currently in, the word hope gets thrown around a whole lot. And I'm not talking about the political season, I'm talking about the NFL season, right? That season. People going, this is our year, we have hope. And I'm like, dude, you're a Raiders fan, man, don't. Facts, right? Listen, if we're going to be hopeful people, though, it starts by us understanding what hope is really all about. Because truth is, you can hope for a lot of things, yeah? You can want a lot of things to happen. But here's what hope really is. Hope is the settled assurance that the future is going to be better than today. Hope is this settled confidence in us that the future is going to be a lot better than it is today. Hope is a lot about the future. Have you noticed that? Hope is a lot about what we're anticipating. We feel hope when what we're expecting is good in the future. In fact, our level of hope is all about what we think the future holds for us. Real hope sounds like a couple of things. Real hope always says a couple of things. Number one, real hope says this: the bad won't last forever. Whatever bad you're experiencing won't last forever. Now look, I'm a Cowboys fan, okay? Yeah, I know. Listen, don't believe me. That is not lost on me. We have been saying this right here since 1998. Okay? I get it. Can I just tell you, hopelessness and despair, not just for the Cowboys, but that too, but hopelessness and despair sets in when we look at any situation and say, this will never change, right? Whatever bad is going on, it is going to go on probably forever. It is never going to get better. In fact, it might even get worse. Despair always tells us that the bad will never end. But hope comes along and says, whatever bad you're experiencing right now, it is only temporary. Hopeful people have this settled assurance that whatever difficulty they're enduring, it has an expiration date on it, and that good is coming down the road for them. Hope always says the bad won't last forever. But the second thing that hope says is this: the good will never end. This is what Kansas City fans are thinking right now, yeah? Yeah, we won 2 in a row. Yeah, tell it to the Patriots, right? I'm just saying. But when you're really hopeful, you can say, you know what, this good that I'm experiencing, it's never going to end. Like, here's the thing, though. When things start going well, we have this tendency to want to tell ourselves, hey, enjoy it now. Enjoy it now. Why? Because something inside of us believes that the good that we're experiencing won't or maybe can't last. Like, we're trying to guard ourselves from disappointment when we do that. And think about what we say. We say, you should never think the good's going to last. Why? Because you don't want to get your what? Your hopes up. Yeah? Listen, this is, when we talk like that, that's what cynicism is made of. The idea that nothing is good, and even if it is good, it's never going to last. This is the stuff of hopelessness and despair. But real, resilient hope says, look, no matter the circumstances, no matter the time of day, no matter what's going on right now, the bad won't last and the good won't end. That is real hope. And that's why it's so hard. That's why one of our former presidents wrote a book and called it The Audacity of Hope. Because it's a little nervy to say the bad won't last and the good won't end, right? I mean, you got to be a little bold. Remember I said it's going to make you sound a little crazy, a little naive, maybe even a little uninformed to say the bad won't last and the good will never end. I mean, some people are going, hey, have you looked around lately? How can you say that? Have you seen how much stuff costs lately? Do you understand the policies those guys are trying to put in place? I mean, have you heard about the wars that are going on in this world? And seriously, that person could be our next president? I mean, how can you have hope these days? That's why hope is so challenging. When it seems like bad is everywhere and picking up steam, and when good seems to be in short supply and losing ground, it is so easy as followers of Jesus, and I've seen this happen so many times, when even as followers of Jesus, we jump in and join the cynical, angry, hopeless mob saying the bad will never end and the good will never last. Listen, this is why hope stands out from the culture. This is why in difficult times it might be the most conspicuous of qualities. So here's a question. How do we live with a hope like that in a world like this? That's the question. How do we live with this settled confidence that whatever we're experiencing now is only temporary and that there's a good that's coming that will not end? This is when we start to feel like foreigners in a strange land, right? This is when we start feeling like the world is not our home. Here's the thing. If you're going to live like that, you have to settle this question. Who or what is your hope in? Who or what is your hope in? Can I just tell you, hope makes zero sense when you uncouple it from who or what your hope is in. If you were just talking about hope, you're talking about wishful thinking until you start talking about what your hope is in. This is why hope and trust always go together, because hope is all about who you're putting your trust in to make sure that the bad won't last and the good won't end. So I wrote a poem. Hope is only ever as strong as what or who it's counting on. Yeah. Thank you. Yes. I appreciate the polite golf clap. Like, oh, that was, for you, Mitch, that was great. But isn't that true? Like, hope is only ever going to be as strong in us as what or who we are counting on. Now, again, let me take it back to something I understand. Like I said, I'm a Cowboys fan, okay? And I would like to have a lot of hope right now. But here's the problem. I am having to count on the same group of people who totally blew it last year, okay? Right now, all I've got is wishful thinking. If I'm going to have real hope that the bad circumstances we have been experiencing for decades, let me tell you, I'm going to need someone else to count on, like a new quarterback, maybe, or a new owner. Please help us, right? Our hope is only ever as strong as who or what we're counting on. Now I'm goofing around with all the football stuff, but right, some of us are in some pretty tough circumstances. Some of us are feeling maybe a little bit of some of the despair. Some of us are struggling to even find a way forward with anything that resembles hope. Some of us are in really tough circumstances, and I get that. And truthfully, the world is too, right? The world's in a tough place. Things are not going super well. Many people are really concerned about the condition of the world. Yeah, me too, I am. So if we're really going to live with hope, then we really got to ask, can whatever my hope is in deliver what I'm hoping for? Is whatever you are hoping in for the world to get better, whatever you're hoping in for circumstances to get, is it strong enough to deliver what you're hoping for? Now let's go back to where we started. If we as followers of Jesus are going to show up distinctive and conspicuous in this world, if we're going to show up hopeful in spite of our circumstances, in spite of election results, in spite of how things are going, in spite of cultural struggles, then we are going to have to be settled on who our hope is really in. Let me say it another way to us and push you a little more. How you and I show up in spite of our circumstances, in spite of election results, in spite of cultural struggles, in spite of what's going on in our life, how we show up will demonstrate who we have decided our hope is really in. So, if you have your Bibles, go ahead and turn to 1 Peter chapter 1. We're reading through the book of 1 Peter in this series. What are we reading? 1 Peter, right? And here's why we're looking at that. Because the Apostle Peter wrote this letter. He's a retired fisherman turned fisher of men. Remember, Jesus called him away from his fishing boats and said, Pete, I'm going to have you come with me, and you're going to help me to gather up people that are going to be different kinds of people. And he's writing this ancient letter to some Jesus followers who were scattered across modern-day Turkey. They were scattered across Turkey because the government they were living under was, let's say, less supportive of their Christian beliefs. Like they were living under one of the most oppressive governments in the world. And Peter was writing to these people who were anticipating nothing but bad. They were anticipating persecution because Nero had just been minted as the new emperor of Rome. I mean, it was written in right around 64 AD, when the next thing that's going to happen is Nero comes into full power and begins to do things to Christians that are unspeakable. Just so you know that these Christians' expectations of doom, their expectations of persecution and torture were not just some kind of anxious suspicion. A few years after Peter wrote this letter is when Nero sets fire to Rome. Now, some say he set fire to a section of Rome because he was trying to clear some land to build his golden mansion. But what happened was the fire got out of control, burns most of Rome down, and people are not really happy with Nero. So you know what Nero does? And this is recorded for us by the Roman historian named Tacitus. And Tacitus, again, writes this from a Roman perspective, but he tells us this about this whole incident with, Rome burning while Nero fiddled. Remember that whole thing? Tacitus says this. He says, to get rid of the report that Nero burned Rome down himself for his own selfish gain, to get rid of that report, Nero fastened the guilt and inflicted the most exquisite tortures on a class hated for their abominations, called Christians. Like their concern that bad was coming was not an idle concern. Their concern turned into the most exquisite tortures from the emperor that was hunting Christians down. It turns out these believers had a good reason to expect persecution. And Peter was writing a letter to these people who had very little reason to expect any good was coming in their future, at least in this life. And so it's in this context that the Apostle Peter writes this. The first thing he says to them right out of the chute is this: all praise to God, the Father of our Lord Jesus Christ. It is by his great mercy that we have been born again, because God raised Jesus Christ from the dead. It's like Peter was saying to them, look, man, I know you're scattered. I know you're scared. I know it looks like we are losing huge, and it looks like it is not getting any better. But our hope isn't in what things look like. Our hope isn't in how things seem to be going. Our hope is in the Father of our Lord Jesus. But because of him and his mercy on us, we have a different kind of life now. We have a life that is eternal in nature and not just temporary. He's saying that we could have a settled confidence because God raised Jesus from the dead. God beat death. What else is there to beat? And our lives are now hidden with Jesus. So for us, even death doesn't mean what it used to mean. That's where our hope is. And then he goes on to say this: so now we live with great expectation. Like instead of this terrible anticipation of the future, now we live with great expectation. And we have a priceless inheritance, an inheritance that is kept in heaven for you, pure, undefiled, get this, beyond the reach of change and decay. Now, when he said the word inheritance to them, they understood what he meant. Because inheritance was a part of their cultural activity all the time. It's how their culture was structured. Inheritance to them meant being included in the wealth of your father. Whatever the father has, one day is going to be accessible to you. He was saying this: we have all of our father's resources to look forward to. And all the stuff that our heavenly Father, that our Father, and that they would have understood their heavenly Father has for them, is pure, it's undefiled, it's unaltered, and it is beyond the reach of change or decay. In other words, the good God has for you will never end. It will never change. So let me ask you this. What is shaping your expectations right now? What is determining your level of hope for the future right now? Is it the condition of the world? Is it the condition of your health? The condition of your finances? Is it your circumstances? Peter is saying this, because our hope is in God, because we have access to all of who God is, our expectations can be different. Our expectations can be set in a different place. And then he says this, because of all that, we can live differently. He says, because of all that, be truly glad. Be truly glad. He says, there is a wonderful joy. Where? Ahead. In the future. Right? Out there where we're hoping for stuff to be better, there is a wonderful joy ahead. Even though you must endure many trials for a little while. He's saying, look, I don't have my head stuck in the sand. I know things aren't going good. Peter's saying, look, I'm not denying there's difficulty right now. Peter's saying, look, this isn't naive. I haven't put the blinders of wishful thinking on. What he's saying here is that because of who our hope is in, we can show up differently. We can show up with a wonderful joy instead of despair. And he even uses those two operative words that are the key words when it comes to real hope, and they're right here. Even though. Even though. Even though it's tough. Even though things aren't going well. We can have a wonderful joy, even though. Look, anybody can say, you know what? There's a wonderful joy ahead, only if. Right? You can be joyful. You can be all kinds of happy, only if things are going well, only if things end up going your way, only if all your problems get solved. But what he's saying here is that we can be truly glad even though there's difficulty, even though there's struggle. Do you hear the hope in this verse? There's wonderful joy ahead. There is good coming that won't end. And even though it's coming, even though you have to endure trials for a little while, the bad that you're experiencing, it won't last. Do you see joy in this? And Peter goes on to talk about these trials. He says, look, these trials will show that your faith is genuine. Like these trials are there so that your faith gets tested as a fire tests and purifies gold. It says, though your faith is far more precious than gold. He says, look, your faith is going to get tested, and the testing of it is going to refine it. It's going to make it stronger. It's going to make it more pure. He goes on to say, so when your faith remains strong through the trials, it will bring you much praise and glory and honor on the day when Jesus Christ is revealed to the world. He's saying, look, the difficulty you're experiencing right now is just going to help you trust God more. And that is actually, your ability to trust God more is going to be of more value to you than gold. I mean, how much value would it be to you to know that whatever circumstances are coming your way, whatever difficulty is coming your way, whatever challenges are going to roll up into your living room, whatever things are coming your way, you can trust God in the midst of those. How much is that worth to you? How much is that worth to your peace of mind? How much is that worth to your life of confidence? Right? He says that when we learn to trust God, it's worth more than money could ever buy. And when you learn to trust God like that, there is an honor waiting for you from Jesus someday. You see what Peter's trying to do? He's trying to get us to turn our perspective in a different direction. But he realizes who he's talking to now. He realizes he's talking to people that see persecution knocking at their door, that sees all kinds of trouble knocking at their door. In fact, you can feel Peter in the next passage kind of empathizing with them. He's like, look, I'm just want to say I'm aware of what you're going through. Because he knows that these people can probably say stuff like this. Well, Pete, it's easy for you to talk about all this faith stuff and trust in God and hope stuff. You saw Jesus face to face. I mean, you hung out with him. You were in the boat when he calmed the storm. You did that walk on water thing with him, for a while. You were with the guy. So Peter encourages him with this. He goes on and says this, you love him even though you've never seen him. And he's not just talking about those people scattered across northern Turkey. He's talking about you. You love him, even though you've never seen him. And even though you don't see him now, you trust him. You trust him. And you rejoice with a glorious, inexpressible joy. The reward for trusting him will be the salvation of your souls. You hanging on to your trust is not going to amount to nothing. You hanging on to your trust in God is not going to end up in vain. You're going to keep trusting God even though there's some hard stuff coming, and it will not be for naught. And then he takes a couple of verses in there and he speaks to them out of their history, referencing how the prophets were looking forward to people who were going to live a life that walked so closely with Jesus like this. He said, even in these verses, he says, even the angels look over the balconies of heaven because they want to see what it looks like for people to trust Jesus like this. And then he wraps this whole thing up and he says this. He says, so prepare your minds for action and exercise self-control. Prepare your minds for action. He said, let the hope that you have for the future, let your trust in who God is, get you ready to live well now. Let your settled confidence that God's good won't end. Let your settled confidence that whatever bad is happening in this world, there's a day coming when that bad is expiration date and it is over. And God takes over and it is all good. Let your settled confidence that that's coming. Don't let that make you hunker down and just wait it out. Let it steady your heart so that you can respond well to whatever is going on around you. Listen, I have heard some Christians take their hope of heaven someday and the good that is coming someday and use it as an excuse to hunker down and do nothing today. To just say, yeah, the world's just done. It's all just, hopeless anyways. We're just going to wait for heaven. That is never what Jesus had in mind for us as his followers. That the hope he offers to us is always meant to strengthen us in the way that we live today so that we can live today God-honoring, distinctive, conspicuous lives that point everybody in the direction of the one who our hope is in. That's why we talk around here about being disciples that make disciples, being people influenced by Jesus who are influencing others in the direction of Jesus. We use our hope of heaven then to live differently now. And so in the end, Pete just comes out and says it. He's like, let me just say it to you. Let me just be as plain as I can be. Put all your hope in the gracious salvation that will come to you when Jesus Christ is revealed to the world. All your hope. Put all of your hope for how things are going to turn out. All of your hope for how your life is going to be. All of your hope for how your circumstance are going to be. Put all of your hope in the gracious salvation that will come. Let your knowledge of the good that won't end be the confidence that informs the way you live now. Put all your hope. So, followers of Jesus, I know things are not like they could be. There are difficulties, there are struggles, things that you are really experiencing right now, suffering and grief. And I know they're probably not looking like they're getting a whole lot better. I just got to tell you very personally, there's somebody very close to me who I've had to come to the grips with this idea. Whatever care we give to them, whatever medical attention we bring alongside them, it's never going to get better. They're never going to get better. That what they're walking through is going to end in their death. But you know what? In the midst of that, what I know is that bad won't last. even when it ends in death, that bad won't last. And what I know for that person, because of their deep faith and trust in Jesus, the good will never end. The good will never end. Look, can I just be straight with you? I have watched so many people who claim to be followers of Jesus descend into anger, negativity, disgust, this fatalistic, despairing posture about the world that we live in. And I'm not blind, I know. The world's not going like it should be going. Things are not happening in this world the way God would want them to happen. I know. But here's what I do know. One day, there's good coming that's never going to end. This world may not be all that it ought to be. But I tell you what, it's not like it's going to be either. When God comes back and Jesus comes back and takes over the place, it's not going to be like that either. Years ago, Chuck Colson, do you remember Chuck Colson? Chuck Colson was the special counsel to Richard Nixon when Richard Nixon was president. Some said he was the second most powerful person in the free world. Because Chuck Colson kind of acted like Richard Nixon's hatchet man, his errand boy, to go do all of his bidding. And he ended up in federal prison for his role in the Watergate scandal, Colson did. But in prison, he met Jesus. And Jesus transformed his life and turned this former hatchet man, federal criminal, into a Christian statesman who just spoke truth into the world from God's perspective. And there's a speech that was captured, Colson giving this speech. And I tried to chase down where he was when he gave this speech. I couldn't find the reference for it, but this speech was so impactful. It ended up in this music video, the song that Stephen Curtis Chapman put out, and became this quote became famous, and it should be. Because Colson, after living the life he lived and then finding Christ and looking at the condition of the world, he said this. He said, "Where is the hope?" He said, "I meet millions of people who feel demoralized by the decay around us. Where is the hope?" He said, "The hope that each of us has is not in who governs us or what laws we pass or what great things we do as a nation." He said this, "Our hope is in the power of God working through the hearts of people." And that's where our hope is in this country, and that's where our hope is in life. Listen, I'm just telling you, if you are going to have real hope that the bad won't last and the good won't end, you better make sure that the one you have hope in can deliver on that promise. And I'm just telling you, there's only one that I have ever met that can deliver on a promise like that. And it's Jesus. So come on. We have a personal relationship with the one who defeated death. We have an all-access pass to all of the resources of heaven. We know, like the Apostle Paul said in 2 Corinthians, he said, we may be outwardly wasting away. Our world may be outwardly wasting away, but inwardly, we are being renewed day by day. And these temporary troubles that we're experiencing are only giving us the opportunity to trust our God even more and to live conspicuous, hopeful, distinctive lives that point everybody in the direction of the one we hope in. So, how about if we do this? Because like every week we get up here and talk to you and stuff, and at the end we're always saying, here's some stuff to do. Like go and do this stuff, like read through the book of 1 Peter, that'll help you. Do that. But how about if we do this? How about if we practice the Word of God this way? Every time you look at the culture around you, every time you look at what's happening in your own experience, every time you look at your own health, every time you watch yourself get older and things don't work like they used to work and you start getting discouraged, every time you see the decay around you, you say this: but I put my hope in God. How about if that just became our practice all the time? How about if we you watch the news and go, wow, that didn't seem to go very well, but you know what? I put my hope in God. Wow, that election didn't turn out the way that I thought it was going to, but I put my hope in God. While our culture isn't heading in the direction that I think it probably ought to head in, but you know what? I put my hope in God. While I see the decay happening around me, while I see the difficulties happening around me, I see the suffering that's even coming in my own life, but you know what? I put my hope in God. How about if we just do that and see how that works for a while? And then let's get out there and live these conspicuous, unignorable, joy-filled, optimistic, not full of wishful thinking, but full of hope lives that point everyone to the one that our hope is in. Let's do that. Well, listen, yeah. Our team's going to come lead us in a song. Why don't you stand up right now? We're going to sing. I just want to tell you, we don't sing songs like this to fill time. But the song we're about to sing, listen, needs to be your anthem. It needs to be deep in your heart. That you sing this with a full heart and full of passion. That you declare, I put my hope, I put my trust in God. Look, I understand against the backdrop of the things that are happening in our world today, it can sound a little naive, a little audacious to just say, hey, put your hope in God. But that's where our hope lies, in the God who can deliver for us a life that says, you know what, no matter what happens in this life, the bad will not last, and the good ultimately will never end. Put your hope in God. I hope you will take that simple practice with you into this week, into the next month, and through this next season. Look, if we can be of a support to you, we want to do that. Jump in with us at canyonridge.org and find all the resources that you need. Hit like and subscribe. Join us here every week. Bring someone along with you, and we'll see you next week.